Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our No Panic Guide Live virtual event series. I'm John Cohn from KPCC and LAist. Today, our business and economy reporter, David Wagner, will be speaking with the California EDD's Lori Levy and Legal Aid at Work's George Warner. They'll be answering your questions. Speaking of, you can drop those into the comment feed at any time. More info on our virtual events at kpcc.org/in-person, where you can also sign up for our newsletter, follow KPCC and LAist on social media for updates. Links to all of these points of connection are in the comments section. And without further ado, David Wagner.
Thanks, John, and hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm a KPCC business and economy reporter, David Wagner. Lately, I've been covering how California's unemployment system has been responding to the widespread job losses we've been seeing during this pandemic. I've been talking to different workers in the LA area. I've been talking to hairstylists, truck drivers, musicians, gig workers, all different kinds of workers who've been trying to navigate the state's unemployment system so that they can get the benefits they need to stay afloat during this unprecedented time. I've been hearing about their frustrations. I've been hearing about their confusion over the unemployment system. And hopefully this event is going to clear up some of that confusion. We want to spend most of the event here answering your questions. But first, I'm going to introduce our guests. Lori Levy is the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at California's Employment Development Department, or EDD for short. And that's the office that handles unemployment claims here in California. Lori, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then we also have George Warner. He's an attorney with the Wage Protection Program at the San Francisco-based nonprofit Legal Aid at Work. George, thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And Lori, I just want to start with you real quick. I need to set the conversation here. Let's talk about just how many Californians are applying for unemployment right now. I mean, we got new numbers this morning. They show that more than 530,000 Californians filed for unemployment last week. That brings the grand total to 3.4 million Californians since this pandemic began. And, just to put that in perspective, those huge numbers, that means 1 out of every 6 workers in the state has now filed for unemployment benefits. And I guess my question, just to start off with, to you, Lori, is how is EDD responding to this avalanche of new claims?
And it truly is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary situation requiring extraordinary response. And so we have been really strategizing on a daily basis as to what can we do outside of what we've ever done before in this unemployment insurance program to help get these claims processed as quickly as possible and get this much needed funds into the hands of people who need it. So it really is a daily task. We're updating the situation every day. So that's why we have so much information up on our website to really help guide people and get them to the information they need most.
And then to you, George, you're an attorney that often works with people seeking unemployment. From your perspective, how are things going for people trying to apply right now?
Yeah, and I'll just start with a caveat that I usually don't talk with people who are not having trouble because they don't need to reach out to me. And I know that the EDD is really facing an unprecedented situation and trying their hardest right now to get people benefits as soon as possible. And one of the many barriers that they're facing is that their funding is lots of their funding, federal funding, is linked to last year's unemployment numbers. So they have record low funding to deal with record high numbers of claims. That being said, I think the people who I'm having the most conversations with are people who are working for a platform like Uber or Lyft, or were otherwise misclassified and unsure how to get benefits or unsure how to get them quickly. I'm also having a lot of conversations with people who have been temporarily penalized, and I'm having conversations with people who just are having trouble accessing the phones and not totally understanding how to get in touch with the ED. But I do, I'm an advocate, and I definitely want to advocate for the communities that are struggling right now. But I also want to remind people to be somewhat patient with the EDD as they're facing a really unprecedented situation.
Well, and you touched on a number of questions we're really getting a lot right now. So let's jump into those audience questions. We've been getting a lot of questions from self-employed people, independent contractors, gig workers, like you just mentioned, George. Lyra Maria writes in, is it true that independent contractors have to wait until April 28th to even apply?
Well, all kind of depends on whether or not you believe you've been misclassified as an independent contractor instead of an employee. If that's the case, then we do encourage you and have been encouraging you to apply for a regular unemployment insurance claim and report to us your earnings and so forth. And that kind of triggers a wage investigation on our end where we can work with you to make a determination about whether or not, yes, you are an employee or an independent contractor, and then whether or not you would be eligible for benefits. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is the federal government through the CARES Act did establish a whole new program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And when we get that thing fully built, it's going to probably rival the current regular unemployment insurance program in terms of its size and scope. So it's a massive effort. It's kind of like trying to build a building extreme makeover style. So we're trying to just throw everything we have at it to get it up as quickly as possible. And right now we are aiming for the 28th to be able to start taking applications for that. We've got some great information up on our EDD website and some really good helpful FAQs so people can understand how the eligibility works for this, since it is paid for by the federal government, and what's going to be required for you to apply for those benefits.
Yeah, so this is, oh, go ahead, George.
Can I just add, I think that's, I mean, obviously that's right. That I'm not used to actually having these calls with someone from EDD on the line. I just would want to emphasize that that some people who may be misclassified, the kind of rules of thumb that I've been telling people is if you're going into someone's office every day and doing a 9 to 5, or you were until recently, or you're doing the same type of work that the hiring entity does, like if you're a janitor at a janitorial company or a driver at a company that provides rides, you're probably an employee under California law. And then on pandemic unemployment assistance, I know that there's people do need to think a little bit critically about what benefit that makes most sense for them, and there are some important benefits. There's some reasons why unemployment insurance is a better benefit than pandemic unemployment assistance. So if you're possibly misclassified, it does make sense to get unemployment insurance over pandemic unemployment assistance if you can.
Right, and we've gotten a lot of questions about this. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program is scheduled to launch on Tuesday. There are a lot of people out there, though, who may have already applied. They are independent contractors, but they've already applied through the normal UI system. We got a question from a listener named John. He says, I'm a self-employed independent contractor. I filed for unemployment on March 29th. Should I cancel the filing and wait to file when the new system is set up for the self-employed? Lori, do you have any guidance for him on whether he should cancel the old application and start a new one under PUA, or should he let both of them go forward?
Unfortunately, we cannot cancel a claim. So once that is initiated, we do have to go ahead and process that. We are required to go back and look at how much earnings are there over the last 18 months in order to be able to substantiate a normal or regular UI claim. And if there are wages in that period, we are required to go ahead and initiate a regular unemployment insurance claim. And the federal government wants us to consider a PUA claim as a last resort. So if that's why we're saying, if it's really clear, we're hearing from a lot of people, it's very clear they're self-employed or they're independent contractors, they're business owners. They're people who don't have sufficient work history. They may have just been scheduled to start a job and so forth. Those are folks that this program is intended to assist. And so we're going to have a lot of good information to try to help people sort through it all and help guide you as to how to apply for benefits. It does require some additional information we have to collect from you. For instance, you have to self-attest to your earnings, and we're trying to kind of get these payments made in phases so we can start off with a minimum benefit, and then we collect some in your earnings information from you to see if we can substantiate a higher benefit amount. So there really are some good pieces of information people are going to need to have, and we're going to be updating our website here over the next couple of days with that very important information.
I'll paraphrase a question I've heard from a lot of people, particularly rideshare drivers, who many of them have already applied through the normal unemployment insurance program. Now, those kind of claims, though, can take a lot longer than the normal 3-week turnaround. And I've heard from some drivers who wonder, should I just go ahead and apply for PUA because I might get my benefits sooner? They might turn around faster. Should people who've already applied, who think that they're misclassified, should they wait for that to keep going forward? Or should they go ahead and apply for PUA with the assumption that they might get money quicker?
Chances are, and again, we're trying to still iron out all the instructions, but chances are if you've already got a claim in the system, because you're going to be entering into the same UI online system to apply. So chances are we'll have record of that you already have a claim initiated, and we have to do some things on the back end to process that. So I would just say that it's, again, if you have not applied yet and you believe you truly are a self-employed independent contractor, those PUA benefits are designed to assist you. And we'll have some good information in terms of what information we have to gather from you, some proof of earnings, et cetera, to be able to make sure we can get that claim processed quickly. And luckily, we're going to be able to automate a lot of that in terms of kind of the back weeks to February 2nd. So some of those initial payments should be able to arrive pretty quickly as soon as people certify.
Great. And then Ken has this question. It touches on something I'm hearing a lot from people who've already exhausted benefits. He writes, I exhausted my unemployment insurance benefits in December, and I'm supposed to wait till July to open a new claim. Am I eligible to file now, or how can I receive extended benefits?
Well, there is another part of the Federal CARES Act called the 13-week federal extension that the EDD is working to implement now, and we'll be getting more information up as soon as that's readily available. But I can tell you that there's also a provision in the PUA program where someone who has run out of their benefits and still has an active claim can go ahead and possibly be eligible for PUA benefits. So we're finalizing some good instructions for people, but it's quite possible that if you ran out of those benefits prior to or on March 21st, and your job, you lost your work as a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and again, you've run out of those benefits, then we might actually be able to have you do a PUA claim for a certain amount of weeks, and at some point convert that claim to an extension claim. So I know it all sounds very convoluted and confusing. There's a lot of different instructions we have to iron out with everything that the federal government put into these programs, the different start dates, the different requirements, the different things EDD has to implement. So we're just asking people, hang in there with us. We're trying to decipher it all down and make it as easy as possible for people to follow along what they need to do.
Right. Lancione writes something similar along those lines. He's also ran out of benefits. His benefits are expiring next week. He writes, do I need to do anything to extend, or is it done automatically? Do people have to put in any more info to get that 13-week federal extension, or is EDD going to process that on their own?
And again, we are still setting up the programming for that 13-week extension. In the past recession, we were able to automatically do that for folks, reach back in, find those claims and do that for them. We're still trying to figure out if that's possible with these new rules and regulations. But I can tell you, if we're hopefully going to be instructing you to go to a PUA program, perhaps in the meantime, you do have to reapply because we have to collect some additional information from you. You have to self-attest to your earnings. So there are a couple additional questions that we have to collect that helps us process that claim. And again, I know it sounds confusing. You may have to start with one claim and then transfer it to an extension, but we'll help iron that all out for people on our website.
Tanya writes in, this is a question that we are getting as it starts to look like some companies may reopen, some workers may start going back to work. Tanya writes, for those on work furlough, if we go back to work before the claims process is complete, are we still going to be eligible for retroactive payments for the time that we were unemployed?
Well, again, these benefits are designed as partial wage replacement. So if you are out of hours and wages through no fault of your own, unemployment benefits can help with that. You do have to report your wages earned. In some cases, that is deducted from your unemployment benefit amount. But as long as you're not able to work your full hours you normally do, you could still maintain eligibility. Again, and your actual biweekly certification that you have to provide to the EDD in order to get your next biweekly payment, we do require that you report to us any earnings you've collected within that time frame.
And can I just add something there?
Yeah.
I think that if you were unable to apply for normal unemployment insurance in a given week, and for some reason the department didn't didn't identify that you should have also been getting unemployment insurance for that earlier week before you applied, you should be writing a letter to the department saying that you had good cause for the delay. And there's many good causes for the delay right now besides just the pandemic and the phone situation. But basically, everyone should have good cause for any delay, and you should be writing a simple letter to the department. Send it to the location on the upper left hand corner of the notice of award, and explain why they need to backdate your claim. That would be my advice for now, at least.
And we do ask, and we do ask on the application, what was the date that your work became impacted, to help us initiate the start of your claim. So especially in pandemic unemployment assistance, we're asking you that because you had to have lost your work through no fault of your own as a direct result of the pandemic, or as the COVID pandemic. And that goes back to February 2nd. So again, those are the kind of things, that the information we need to collect from you. And I will say, we're getting a lot of people, because I keep checking in with all of our call center staff, et cetera, who are not providing all the information required on the application. And when that happens, or they provide a wrong SSN, the social security number, that kind of sends them into a queue that staff have to work, and that helps delay the claim process. So we really are encouraging people to take real good care to make sure you get that information provided as required, and make sure that information is entered accurately.
We got an email from Jenny. This is another common issue that we're running into. She writes, what about people who have already been approved and received notification that they were supposedly paid, but the EDD debit card just never arrived? She says that she wonders what's out there for people who've been approved for payment since mid-March, but still haven't received the debit card.
Well, and again, that's a case-by-case basis. I can't really kind of say what someone's special circumstances might be, but generally speaking, for most people, within a couple of weeks after you apply and you do your first certification, telling us, answering some questions that you're eligible, then you should receive that EDD debit card within about 7 to 10 days from that period, with making your first benefit payment arriving by card in about 3 weeks. So if it's going like much further beyond that, you really do need to make sure that you're checking in. There is some B of A information, Bank of America information on our website about how you go ahead and contact them if you're missing a card. I did have, for instance, somebody contact me and said, where's my card? And they found out that they live in an apartment complex and it was delivered to the wrong mailbox. And so a neighbor was able to get it to her. So it really is all kinds of different situations, but it really should be arriving in about 7 to 10 days from when you certify for benefits.
George, I'm wondering if you can take this one. We got this from Crystal, who wrote in through Facebook. She writes, what happens if someone last worked out of state, but they were just about to start a job in California? She said that she lost her new job offer here in California due to the coronavirus, but her previous earnings came from another state. Should she apply for unemployment in the previous state or in California? And she adds that at this point, both states have denied her claims.
Actually, I'll let Lord take that, but I think she should be. There is reciprocity between states, so that California should have access, should be able to. She should be eligible in California, and but you can go ahead and supplement. You feel free.
Yeah, sure, happy to. Typically, wherever those wages were earned, that's who responsible is for paying the claim. So if all the wages were earned in a different state, that's the state that should be eligible or making that eligibility for benefit payment. And if there's wages that happen to have been earned over the last 18 months between a couple different states, there is an arrangement where we can coordinate together in terms of how those wages can be collected and combined.
Yeah, this was a question that came up from a number of people who wrote in, people who are just about to start jobs, people who may have been out of work for a long time. Maybe they were caring for an ill family member. They haven't been working for a year or two. They were just about to start a job, or they just recently started a job, and now they're unemployed. They don't have much wage history. What should they do?
So if you don't have enough wage history to be eligible for unemployment insurance, and you can certify that you were about to start a job but then lost that job because of COVID-19, then you'd be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. One of the options for certifying eligibility for pandemic unemployment assistance is saying that you were about to start a job, but that job had been delayed or lost because of COVID-19.
And that's one of those eligibility issues that we do have up on our website right now on a pandemic unemployment assistance page to help people get familiar with the various kind of scenarios that could make someone eligible.
Great. This question came from Sarah, who wrote in that my husband and I own a recording studio. I receive sporadic W-2 residual checks from work I originally did in the 80s and 90s, but our money really comes from running our studio, and our income varies. Who do I list as my employer?
And most likely it's going to be yourself. If you're self-employed, that's your business. That's who you're going to be listing, and it's probably more of a pandemic unemployment assistance claim.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'll use that just as an example. It's there are a lot of people who have a lot of different employers,
Exactly,
or work for different types of people. And if you have some income that you get in a W-2 and some income you get in a 1099 and run your own small business on the side, if you're working as an employee in any setting in the last 18 months, you should start by going to applying for unemployment insurance, because the first screen, if you're eligible for unemployment insurance, you're not eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. So, and those people are it's a little hard. The system's a little harsh on those people because they may be getting a weekly award based on a small fraction of their actual regular earnings. And one thing that those that the people in that situation might want to consider is looking at the Small Business Administration loan options to see if supplementing their income through that route, or also by looking at the Family First Coronavirus Response Act paid sick leave provisions, which allow for self-employed people to get tax credits to themselves for giving themselves certain types of leave, would be more advantageous, financially advantageous solutions.
And I would just add to that, absolutely, that again, we are required to look at the wages that someone or the earnings someone has had over the last 18 months. And if there's enough there to qualify for a regular claim, that's how EDD has to proceed, with PUA being the last resort. However, even if it is a small regular unemployment insurance benefit, remember that between the end of March and the end of July, the EDD is now adding automatically an additional $600 in federal stimulus benefits to each week of regular unemployment benefits that someone may qualify for during that particular point in time. So that does help get a little bit more money into that weekly benefit amount.
Yeah, and to follow on that, Leandro wrote in with this question that kind of gets to that reality that a lot of people are not just employees, they're not just self-employed, there's some mix of both. He writes in, I'm a health practitioner with a private practice that's pretty much gone. I also have a part-time faculty job, so I already filed my unemployment claim. I'm confused about whether I need to apply for the new program for self-employed people. So it sounds like most of his income is coming from self-employment. He already went ahead and filed the UI claim based on his part-time faculty job. What's the right next move for him here?
And it's hard to say because I don't know what status his regular unemployment insurance claim is in, so I can't really comment on that. However, we are building a lot of good guidance in on our webpage for launch next week that'll kind of help people decipher which way they should go and which more likely scenario best kind of suits what they're looking for. So it's very confusing, and I'm glad this is an opportunity for us to be able to provide a lot of good information. So just hang in tight with us, and we'll try to provide a lot of that good guidance and instructions as we move along.
And I'll just, I usually am playing the role of just giving straight guidance, but since we're fortunate enough to have a spokesperson of the EDD actual on the line, I will say that, just from an advocate's perspective, the system is too confusing. And it's not EDD's fault. It's actually like the complexities of the code are too confusing. Like and just from a straight political angle, I think that there's too much concern in making sure that everyone's getting just as much as they deserve and not a penny more. And if the solution was a little bit simpler to implement and maybe less, not everyone was getting exactly the precise number, we'd be in a lot better situation right now.
It would be simpler.
Well, and on that note, George, I know you've got to get going a little bit early. Thank you so much for sticking with us and answering some of these questions. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me, and I also really appreciate being on the line with the true expert from EDD. So thank you, and I'll look forward to talking to you guys again.
And I appreciate your extra information.
Bye.
Well, thank you, George. Bye. And Lori, we've still got some questions that we would love to put to you. Let's see. We've got a couple of questions from older workers. This has come up a lot. Glenn writes in, I'm over 65. If we're following Governor Newsom's executive order to stay home, shouldn't we be eligible for unemployment as we're unavailable to work because we're following the executive order?
Well, it all depends upon whether or not you have a job that you've lost, right? So whether or not you were working, since it is a wage replacement program, it's designed to replace maybe up to half of the wages you could have been earning had it not been for this pandemic. So that's really kind of the key factor. Again, it's employers who pay for unemployment benefits through contributions made on behalf of each employee on their payroll. I think a lot of people sometimes misunderstand that it's not employees or who pay for this benefit. It really is employers. So not really knowing that specific case or having information on that, I would say generally speaking, you had to have had some work that you were losing.
So you have to have been laid off. I mean, I'm kind of reading between the lines here and paraphrasing a bit, but it sounds like this person still has a job that they can go to, but they feel uncomfortable with it. And to follow up on that, I've heard from a number of people. This one kind of gets to that. Milagro writes in, what if you work for a doctor's office that will not close and workers were exposed to the virus? What can you do? I've heard people from nursing homes, motels, basically who feel unsafe going into work, and they're wondering if they can just stop going to work and then apply for unemployment benefits.
And there is some information on our website to try to address that particular concern. Obviously, to be able to, there's a unique situation here in this pandemic, and we understand that, for instance, that people don't need to be looking for work right now since it's very difficult to come by. But you do have to remain eligible and ready to return to work if that's possible. So again, those are the kind of situations on a case-by-case basis that will collect your information when you apply, and then we'll kind of sort through that with you.
Here's a question on something that I see a lot. People wondering, they're getting these $0 determinations and they're confused by that. They wonder what that really means. Stan writes in, I'm a freelance artist. I filed for coronavirus-related unemployment benefits and I received a notice from EDD saying no benefits are available for my claim. Can you help people understand what that means when you get a form back that says, $0 or no benefits available?
This is one of those commonly asked questions. So we produce a really good frequently asked question item on our website because we are getting so many of those types of questions. So I really would encourage people to check that out. It's got some good instructions as to what to do, but usually that means one of three things. Number one, perhaps there wasn't any wages reported for you. And if you're a true independent contractor or self-employed, that makes sense. There was no employer to report any wages. So that could mean that. It could also mean that you're going through a identity verification process. We weren't able to verify your identity, and we need to get some more information back from you before we can go ahead and release those wages. And there's also a situation, of course, where it may have been that you believe you've been misclassified and you should have been considered an employee. And when you get that notice, it says if you don't agree, it's not necessarily a denial. It means if you don't agree and you think there should be wages there for you, you're asked to supply that information and return it to the address provided. So it just means that we've encountered something here where we need to kind of work out with you if you disagree with what we've come to a conclusion of so far.
So it's not the final response necessarily.
No.
Yeah. Here's a question from someone with multiple jobs. Susanna writes in the thread right now. I work a full-time job and I'm still employed 40 hours per week, but I was laid off from my part-time server job. Can I apply for unemployment insurance for that lost part-time wages?
Unfortunately, the legal requirements are if you're still working what's considered a full-time job, then you're not considered unemployed. Even if that means that you're not being able to do the full part-time job on the side. Unfortunately, if you are still considered fully employed, you probably would not be considered eligible for unemployment benefits.
Okay, so anybody working 40 hours a week still would not be eligible even if they were working substantially more in the past, if you have a full-time job.
Yeah, generally speaking, that's the way we have to address it.
Okay. Here's another common one. John writes in, should I stay at home or should I go out and look for a job? Is the state going to want me to be actively looking for a job in order to get unemployment benefits? You know, this is a question that comes up in the application process. Are you actively looking for a job? Are you available to work? A lot of people these days think, well, no, I'm not, you know, it's not safe to look for a job. There are no jobs to find. How should people be approaching this?
Again, that is one of those commonly asked questions. So we put together a really nice frequently asked question on that item right on our website to help guide people. We're not able to go in and actually change all the forms associated with this program. But what we were able to do in this very unique circumstance of the pandemic is we've been able to adjust our usual eligibility requirements. And that helps us automatically process loads of claims through our UI online system. So in other words, what normally is required for you to be eligible for benefits, we're able to push aside for the moment because of this pandemic. So answer the question honestly, but it will not prohibit you from getting paid benefits for that week as long as you meet all other eligibility requirements. We take care of that on the back end. So don't worry about that question. It's not going to prevent benefit payments.
Okay, Larry writes in with a question. He's self-employed. He has a vending machine route. He writes, I have 15 locations closed right now. 11 of those are locations at schools, so they're going to be closed for a while. I'm down to working about 1.5 days a week now. Am I going to be able to collect unemployment? So this is a self-employed person who sounds like they still have some work, but much less than they used to. Is he going to be eligible for PUA?
I think that's probably going to be the best route, knowing what you just told me there. Again, this is for those who are truly self-employed and your work has been impacted directly as a result of the pandemic. So that is one of the eligibility requirements of pandemic unemployment assistance benefits. So I would encourage this individual to look for that, that availability next week and apply for PUA benefits.
And there's always the question of timing. People are always asking, writing in to ask when they're going to receive their benefits. Tess wrote in that she applied for unemployment on March 29th, but hasn't received payments yet. How long does it typically take to process a claim, and when can people expect benefits?
Well, typically, it usually always takes about 3 weeks from the time someone applies. Within that time frame, you'll hear from us, and you have to certify for your very first payment, which means you answer a set of questions telling us, okay, here's my situation. I'm still unemployed and eligible. And then we turn around and we get you that first benefit payment with an EDD debit card. Some people choose a check, which will take a lot longer, but an EDD debit card. And then from that point on, you're in what we call continued claim status. And every 2 weeks, you have to do that certifying, and we're able to turn around your next payment on your debit card within just a day or two. So once you get into that continued claim status, it happens every 2 weeks. I would say that we're able to stick with that pretty much for most Californians due to the extraordinary measures we've taken in a number of different regards. But I will say that I've checked just this morning, and we continue to get a lot of people who have not completed the application correctly, who have not reported their information correctly. They made a mistake. I even get a lot of emails. Oh, I made a mistake. And unfortunately, that will slow down the processing. It ends up going into a different queue. And now we have to bring staff off to help work that. So, and this is a case where it really is, I'm hoping Californians can help us help you by really taking good care to fill out everything that's required. There's a really good UI checklist that we have up on our website that tells you what information you're going to need to provide. That should help you. Make sure that you give us your identity, verify your identity and so forth. That helps us process that a lot quicker, and use those self-serve tools, I should say, as much as possible, because it's really difficult, obviously, to get through on the phone right now with so many people in this situation.
So for those applications where everything is kind of squared away, 3 weeks is still what you're trying to stick to. It can take longer in certain circumstances. I want to dwell on that for a second, though. Can you tell me about the timing of payments? I know some of this information is already available online, but what are the timing of payments going to be like for the people going through PUA? Is it going to take 3 weeks, or are payments going to be sent out quicker than that? What are those payments going to look like?
Well, and it really kind of depends on how straightforward the claim is. You're a self-employed worker. You're able to show us that, yes, here's what I could have been earning if I could as of this date. It's a direct result of the pandemic. Then those are the things we should be able to process very quickly once you get in and apply, and turn around that first certification to you so that you can complete that, and we can get those first benefit payments to you in pretty quick order within a couple of days, as long as it's one of those straightforward claims. If you already have your EDD debit card. A lot of people do from a past claim, even a past disability or paid family leave insurance claim. That card is good for 3 years. So if you already have that card, that even helps us quicker in terms of turning that payment around, that first payment.
Okay, Laurel writes through email, my company cut my hours by 25%. I filed for unemployment, but the form came back and said I was laid off completely. How do I get my form changed so that it shows, I'm not laid off completely, I'm just working reduced hours?
Again, I'd have to look at that particular circumstance to make any particular solid comment here. But I will say that in terms of regular unemployment benefits, we are required when you report your income to us, whatever that source comes from, then there are many situations by which we could have to deduct what's over 25% or over $25 in that week from your unemployment insurance benefit amount. So it could be a situation where she had some earnings affecting her eligibility for a benefit that week. It's hard for me to say without looking at her records, but those are the kind of things that we have to look for when people are certifying for their ongoing benefits.
Here's a question from Dawn, who writes in, my employer told me that I was in contact with a coworker who's really sick. They told me that I need to quarantine for 14 days. Should I still receive my regular pay, or do I file for unemployment? And I guess the question is here, is there anything else for this person besides unemployment?
There are some paid sick leave provisions that have been announced as part of the overall response to this pandemic. That's kind of dealt with out of a different part of the labor agency. I don't have all the details on that, but I can tell you that there are some things that you can do depending upon your employer, what kind of leave options you have and so forth. But when you do lose work, or you lose wages through no fault of your own, that's the situation by which you apply for an unemployment claim.
And here's Sonia writes in over the live stream. This is something that just comes up over and over again. People just having technical difficulties with their application, confusion over the forms. They need to reach somebody. Is there a way to talk to an actual person at EDD? This is just a question that I see constantly.
And I think it's so understandable, because this is probably the first time for many people that they've ever encountered the unemployment insurance program. So we understand that. That's why we've made so many good tools available to assist people. There's just no way we can answer calls from millions and millions of people all at one time. That's just the unfortunate circumstance. So we don't want to leave you empty-handed. There are some video tutorials in 5 different languages on our website to help you navigate the UI online system. There's that step-by-step chart helping you understand what to expect after you apply. A lot of good tools there. And even what we're getting to our call centers, a lot of common questions, again, that we have frequently asked questions for on the website. But we do know that some people need a little additional helping hand. So we added an additional call center operation starting just last Monday with a separate phone number available 7 days a week. And it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And this is where we're getting hundreds of redirected employees from throughout EDD, from throughout state government, coming to EDD's aid with this very necessary assistance. So there are going to be people there who can do the common things, answer your questions, help you change your password on the system, help you navigate some technical assistance. It's there for you, and it's a special line that we created, and it's 833-978-2511. I would really encourage people to avail themselves of that call center if they really need that kind of extra helping hand.
Here's a question I'll paraphrase from a number of people who've contacted me. This is something that George talked about earlier, George Warner from Legal Aid at Work. Why is the EDD still enforcing penalties for false statements? Basically people say that they're not able to receive benefits right now because they kind of screwed up their information in the past. They were confused by the forms. They got something wrong. People are reaching out to me saying that they shouldn't be made to go without benefits right now because of an honest mistake in the past. Is this something that EDD is approaching differently at a time like this?
We're certainly looking at that, and we've been doing all kinds of things that are extraordinary in these circumstances. So it's something we're looking at. However, it does remain one of our biggest fraud deterrent elements by law. And by law, if someone is found to have made a false statement, and that's considered fraud, then we have to go ahead and apply these penalties. And at this point in time, that's what we still have to do. But again, it is something we're reviewing, and along with a lot of other things. So just keep an eye on our website for more information as those things develop.
And I'm starting to see some repeat questions here, but here's one about the $600 per week coming through the CARES Act. When are people going to start getting that? When should they start looking for that additional $600 a week? This comes from the live stream from Linda.
Hi, Linda. Well, actually, we've started processing those extra $600 federal payments. It started with the week ending. The first week eligible is the week ending April 4th. We're not able to go back any further than that. This is the federal government and their rules. And then what we do is we automatically apply that extra $600 to each week of regular benefits someone's receiving. And because those are done on bi-weekly cycles, as people are coming up on their next payment, that's when they're seeing this additional $600 per week. So in a biweekly payment, you could get additional $1,200.
Great. Let's see, and I'm just going through the document here. Let's see if any come through, and I thank you for your patience here.
Oh no, thank you for the opportunity to be able to get out some really helpful information to people.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm just having a tough time getting through this. This is another question that you might be able to address. Mary writes, and I just lost it. Mary writes, my office is still open, but I stopped working. Sorry, and I keep losing it in the Google Doc here. Mary writes, my office is still open, but I stopped working to stay home and take care of my 88-year-old mother. She's worried sick about this new virus. Can I file for unemployment? So this sounds like another case where someone has voluntarily stopped working, but it's due to concerns over sickness and public health.
Right. A couple of things. First of all, if you believe that there are reasons beyond your control that you're losing work, you could certainly apply, and we'll work through that with you to determine if you are eligible. But if you are caring for an ill family member, someone who's actually ill during this, then that might be a case where you're eligible for a paid family leave claim. And so on our website, we also have information on that program. And again, it's if you're required to lose some of your time at work because you have to care for an ill family member, you could be receiving those benefits. And I encourage you to check out more information about that program.
And another question, I just bring this up because we get it so commonly. I know you talked about the call center a little bit already, but Sonia writes in, I called that number, the 833 number that you gave, and she just keeps getting the same response, which is a recorded message that tells her her call can't be taken right now and that her call is going to disconnect at the end of the recording. Do you have any tips on getting through to the call center, or is it really just keep trying, keep plugging away? Yeah.
We're so sorry about that, because our intent truly is to provide as much service as we can to so many people in California in desperate need for these benefits. So hang in there with us. Every day we are adding, it takes 2 to 3 days to train a lot of these redirected staff to get the information to be able to help people. We have to equip them and so forth. So we're adding to this service on a daily basis. So we're expanding the capacity as we go along, adjusting as we go because of this unique nature of the pandemic. So if you can't get through right now and you really have to speak with somebody, I encourage you to try back again a little later. But in the meantime, check out what we have on our website. You might just find that your questions might have a good answer already there for you. And I'd love to see you be able to avoid the frustration.
And can you give us the best URL for the website? I know edd.ca.gov. It's a big website. There's lots of nooks and crannies. Where should people go first to get that information?
That's just an easy one to remember, because smack dab in the middle there is a big picture of a COVID virus, and it takes you right to our COVID page. So it really is very easy to find. And there's a number of resources there for workers, for employers. There's a good page for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program and FAQs and so forth. Some really great resources. And so it's very easy to find, edd.ca.gov.
This will be a pretty straightforward question, but it's still one we get a lot, especially here in the LA area. What if you are, what if you're an undocumented immigrant? If you don't have a social security number, are you eligible for unemployment, or are you shut out of the program?
Well, you do have to have a legal right to work in the U.S. to be eligible for benefits. So that is a requirement of this federal state program. And so it all just kind of depends on whether or not you have that, and then you could be considered eligible.
Okay, Vanessa writes in, what if you were on paid family leave and then were laid off? Should you wait till your paid family leave claim runs its course, or should you file for unemployment right away?
Well, you can't, we have some information about that kind of between claims on our website on our frequently asked questions, but for all intents and purposes, it all depends really on whether or not your care is still needed for your ill family member. So if that's still the case, then you really need to kind of continue to stick with your paid family leave claim. The benefit amounts, by the way, are higher than our unemployment insurance benefits. So again, it all kind of depends upon the circumstances about why you're missing your time at work.
Great. We got one question from Ricky, who writes, what about truck drivers? I'm an owner operator. Everything falls back on me and I can't afford to take off work, but there aren't a lot of loads right now. I don't know what to do. This person, how would you approach this here? There's a possibility of misclassification under California law. There's a possibility that they are truly a business owner, a self-employed person. Do you have any advice for Ricky?
Again, it all depends on his particular circumstances, as you just mentioned. So it really is whether or not he considers himself to be an independent contractor, or perhaps an employee and maybe misclassified. When you go into our UI online system, you should be able to kind of enter in what your situation is, and we'll kind of take it from there and help guide you in terms, okay, do you have some wages that could have been reported by an employer? And then we can do that wage investigation. Or do you really believe you're an independent contractor and all your earnings are going to come from some kind of independent source? So it really kind of depends on a person's situations, and we'll collect that information from you.
We've heard from a lot of older workers. Yoon writes in, my unemployment insurance benefits ended on March 28th. I'm also applying for early Social Security benefits that I'm going to start receiving on June 1st. I do still need to work though. Can I get my unemployment insurance extended by 13 weeks? So, we've already talked a little bit about extending by 13 weeks. We've addressed that question, but this is one that comes up again and again. Does receiving Social Security benefits stand in the way of people getting unemployment benefits right now?
No, it shouldn't. I don't believe it's considered earnings. So if indeed that's where the only other earnings people have, it probably would not be considered against any kind of unemployment benefit they could be eligible to receive.
Okay. I think that we have really touched on a lot of questions here. I think we're starting to see some repeat questions. I'll give the producers here one more second to see if there's anything I've missed. But Lori, I just really want to say thank you. And I know that your time is really in demand right now. I want to, really want to say thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to answer these questions. I also want to say thank you to George Warner, who was with us here earlier, the attorney from Legal Aid at Work. Huge thanks to both of them. And I want to say thanks to all the audience members out there, people who've written in with their questions. We really hope that this was a helpful Q&A for people out there trying to navigate the system. I'm KPCC business reporter David Wagner. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you, and stay safe out there, everybody.